Hello and welcome to the Business Standard Morning Show. I'm Ishan Gera and here are the stories for the day. There seems to be no breather in sight for consumers who are already facing the brunt of costly food and other household items. An RBI survey showed that households can expect inflation to rise further in the near and medium term. On the other hand, wholesale prices surged to more than a decade high in November. Is it a cause for concern at macro level? This report takes a look.
Pushed by higher food and fuel prices, as well as the impact of rupee depreciation, India's wholesale price inflation, which acts as a proxy for producers' prices, accelerated to a record high this November. The wholesale price index-based inflation rose to 14.23% against 12.54% in October. This is the highest WPI rate in the 2011-12 series and has remained in double digits for the 8th consecutive month. Fuel and power inflation reached 39.81%, while manufactured product prices rose 11.92%. The number has raised fears that this may translate into elevated retail inflation in the short term. The retail or the consumer price-based inflation, which is the main indicator monitored by the Reserve Bank of India's Monetary Policy Committee, rose 4.91% in November. The central bank expects retail inflation to be at 5.1% for the October to December period, and its communication shows it is comfortable with that number. The central bank left interest rate unchanged at a record low of 4%, with Governor Shaktikanta Das stressing that RBI's overarching priority at this stage is revival of growth. India's economy expanded 8.4% in the second quarter, the fastest pace among major economies. Higher retail inflation may scuttle the central bank's effort to boost growth by keeping interest rates low. But Bibek Debroy, chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, says WPI inflation is not a cause for concern.
That if one is thinking of growth and if one is thinking of inflation, I would be more concerned with the revival of growth and how robust is that revival of growth. I do not think the inflation numbers, despite what was said about the WPI, the inflation numbers are that worrying today. After all, there is the MPC, and the MPC will decide its own trade-offs in terms of what is important growth vis-a-vis inflation. Personally, I will not be worried that much about inflation right now.
Companies are slowly turning comfortable in passing on the higher input costs to customers as domestic demand picks up. Several FMCG companies like Hindustan Unilever, ITC and Parle Products have effected price hikes in October and November to ease margin pressures. The expectation of a strong demand recovery has provided optimism for companies. KBS Anand, the former CEO of Asian Paints, echoed Debroy's view that inflation is not a worry if the growth sustains.
Inflation is essentially because of a lot of global factors, shortages and supply side situation. Since it affects almost equally within the industry, it impacts everybody equally. Per se, it shouldn't make a difference if in the medium term growth continues. Mm-hmm. If demand continues and growth continues, inflation is absorbed. Mm-hmm. The problem occurs if for any reason demand is not there and there's excess production capacity and people want to sell whatever they have, then inflation hurts. It hurts the seller. It also hurts the buyer. So inflation is a real-time problem, but I think it's more of a short-term problem in a country like India, where we have been on an ongoing basis growing year on year. Last couple of decades, an average of 7-8% per annum. inflation gets absorbed simply through the efficiency you get of scale, both in manufacturing, in purchase, in overheads, etc. The scale, as scale increases, you can absorb some of the cost of inflation.
Asian Paints and Berger Paints have hiked prices by as much as 20% this fiscal as they expect strong demand going forward. The gap between wholesale and retail inflation has been widening in the recent months, indicating that companies are yet to pass on input cost inflation. But a softening of crude oil prices and the excise duty cut on fuel may help in controlling inflationary pressures on households. For now, the only thing that is masking the pain of inflation and giving the industry and policymakers a feeling of comfort is India's expected high economic growth.
Even as record wholesale inflation led to some anxiety in India, a news from distant France elevated everyone's mood here. Close on the heels of Parag Agarwal's elevation as CEO of Twitter, another Indian-born executive has now been chosen to head a global brand, Chanel. But there are few things which set Leena Nair apart from the other NRI achievers. Our next report explains how Nair is different and offers a peek into her long journey from Kolhapur to London.
Being the first woman in every single job I have done means I get to see just what it means to be in a job that feels built for someone else. I always say, we are all in the same storm, we are not in the same boat. This is what Unilever's Chief Human Resources Officer or CHRO Leena Nair said in an interview to Harper's Bazaar last month. This response of hers fits perfectly in her situation today. The 52-year-old was on Tuesday appointed the new global CEO of French fashion house Chanel. She will be based in London for her new role. As an India-born woman of color, Nair's appointment at the helm of Chanel is certainly an outlier. Chanel has for long been a tightly controlled family fashion house. More importantly, unlike other India-born CEOs of global companies, most recently Parag Agrawal, who took charge of Twitter earlier this month, Nair's educational and professional credentials are for the most part made in India. She completed her schooling in Maharashtra's Kolhapur before earning a degree in electronics engineering from Walchand College of Engineering in Maharashtra's Sangli. Nair went on to complete an MBA from the Xavier School of Management in Jamshedpur, where she was a gold medalist. She joined Hindustan Unilever in 1992 as a management trainee. Nair was among the few women employees to opt for a factory role. It took her to different factories of HUL in Kolkata, Tamil Nadu's Ambattur and Maharashtra's Taloja. In her 30 years at HUL, she rose through the ranks and held posts such as Employee Relations Manager, HR Manager, and Executive Director of HR. After 3 years as Head of Leadership and Organizational Development in London, she was appointed as CHRO in 2016, with the responsibility for the company's 150,000 people across more than 100 countries globally. Nair was also made a member of the Unilever Leadership Executive. She became the first woman, first Asian, and youngest ever CHRO at Unilever, and member of the Unilever Leadership Executive at HUL. Over a period of 10 years starting 2010, she helped the company achieve a 50-50 gender balance across global leadership. Her agenda at HUL also included a commitment to pay the living wage across its whole supply chain. After such a distinguished stint, Nair will step down as Unilever's CHRO next month to join Chanel. Commenting on Nair's stint at Unilever, Alan Jope, CEO at Unilever, said, quote, "I would like to thank Leena for her outstanding contribution over the last 3 decades. Leena has been a pioneer throughout her career at Unilever, but no more so than in her role as CHRO, where she has been a driving force on our equity, diversity and inclusion agenda, on the transformation of our leadership development and on our preparedness for the future of work." Nair has another supporter in former PepsiCo chairman Indra Nooyi. Nooyi, a trailblazer as the rare person of color to helm the food and beverage giant for 12 years as the CEO until 2018, is a mentor to Nair. She has called Nair a kick-ass executive. Surely, Chanel agrees with Indra Nooyi.
From the change of guard in Chanel, let's see how the new coronavirus variant is putting policymakers across the globe in a fix. The sharp rise in inflation and the emergence of Omicron has complicated the picture for global central banks. Be it the US Fed or the ECB, each policymaker is looking to buy time to decide on all the details of adjusting their non-conventional policy tools. Let's look at the policy dilemma of different global banks and how investors are reading the developments in our next report.
Policy outcomes of various global central banks are set to dominate the trading sentiment on the bourses on Thursday. After the outcome of the US Federal Reserve's policy meeting, which was announced last night, investors will eye inflation and growth projections by the Bank of England and the European Central Bank. These banks are set to announce their policy decisions later in the day. Each central bank faces some version of the same dilemma: whether to guard against inflation, end the current era of low interest rates, and central bank asset purchases is more urgent than the economic threat posed by the new COVID variant. However, their different approaches could make for a tumultuous year. Inflation, labor markets, and the link between the virus and economic performance are behaving differently across the major economies, setting up a potentially sharp divide over how central banks manage the coming stage of the pandemic. This stands in contrast to the synchronized and massive support approved at the outset of the coronavirus pandemic in March 2020. While the US Fed has already announced speeding up the tapering program if need be, the Bank of England has been set off course by Omicron's fast spread and the imposition of new restrictions in the country. As regards Europe, the ECB needs to be mindful of the major differences inside the bloc for which it sets policy. Any big retreat from crisis support could deliver unwanted consequences for the sustainability of the high debt loads in the economies such as Italy. Remember, inflation reached a record high of 4.9% in November in Euro region, while Omicron looks likely to become the dominant coronavirus strain, with some European economies already locked down due to the Delta variant. The RBI too has cautioned against the sticky inflation, even though it has maintained its inflation projection at 5.3% for fiscal 2021-22 for now. On the contrary, the inflation that is steering through the other parts of the globe remains largely absent in Japan. As such, only a marginal reduction in corporate asset purchases is under discussion, and the final outcome by the Bank of Japan is expected tomorrow. Given this, most investors worldwide have preferred to be on the sidelines over the past 1 week. Japan's Nikkei, for instance, was up 0.01% during the period. South Korea's Kospi slipped 0.08%. The UK's FTSE 100 dropped around 2%, and S&P 500 in the US eased about 1.5%. Back home, the Sensex and the Nifty indices have slipped 1.6% each. On Wednesday too, the domestic benchmarks ended 0.5% lower at 57,788 and 17,211 levels, respectively. Commenting on the market's performance, Stefan Koopman, senior macro strategist at Rabobank International, said that volatility is high in the equity space and the current market movements predominantly reflect position shuffling ahead of decisions by various central banks. There has been no coherent narrative other than simply the wait for these risk events to materialize. Against this backdrop, growth forecasts, assessment of the impact of Omicron variant on the economies, and the fine print of policy statements will guide investment sentiment for the remaining part of this week. Domestically, stock-specific news flow, weekly F&O expiry, and initial public offers will affect the markets.
Unlike the global policymakers, the market regulator in India does not seem to be in a fix when it comes to reforms. The Securities and Exchange Board of India recently proposed an overhaul of sorts of listing norms to bring in more transparency. One of the major changes that market regulators suggested was to cap the amount companies, mainly startups, can raise under General Corporate Purpose or GCP. So what exactly is GCP, and what do companies do with the amount raised under it?
While filing for an initial public offering or IPO, companies come out with red herring prospectus, also known as offer documents, with details of the IPO. It contains information such as amount to be raised and purpose, meaning how the company plans to utilize the funds raised from the IPO. Before we understand GCP, let us have a look at various reasons the company may want to raise funds. It includes giving liquidity to its shareholders like founders, PE investors, and employees. Companies also raise funds from IPOs for branding and visibility or to take advantage of higher valuation. Most companies also mark the funds of the General Corporate Purpose or GCP. The current rules allow companies to raise up to 25% of their IPO proceeds under a vague head of General Corporate Purpose. The market regulator SEBI, in its consultation paper, has said that raising funds for unidentified acquisitions leads to some amount of ambiguity in the IPO objects. With an objective to bring in more transparency and accountability, SEBI has proposed several key changes. It wants to limit funds utilized for inorganic growth, such as mergers and acquisitions, to 35%, where the target for the acquisition or the strategic investment is unidentified. It also wants companies to make detailed quarterly disclosures about usage of funds raised for GCP. The proposed norms may make it difficult for new age companies to raise funds. These companies often need funds for acquiring new customers and expanding to new markets. The consultation paper was open for general public feedback till November 30th.
That's all we have for you today. We'll be back tomorrow with more news and analysis in our next episode. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.